Good evening. Tonight, President Trump laid out his vision for America, a series of more empty promises and reckless ideas that seek to divide America rather than unite us.
Like his actions in the past year, his proposals will ultimately benefit only the wealthiest individuals, special interests, and the largest corporations.
During his campaign, he promised to drain the swamp. He promised to put money in people's pockets.
Instead, he broke all those promises and passed a tax cut where 83% of the over $6 trillion in tax cuts go to the wealthiest 1%. His vision and promises tonight are more of the same.
As our country heads into 2018, we need a long-term strategic investment in our infrastructure that puts meaningful federal funding and robust public resources into revitalizing our communities through millions of family-sustaining jobs.
Over the last several years, a devastating water crisis hit places like Flint, Michigan. Our nation's roads and bridges continue to crumble, and the middle class has been squeezed by corporations who move jobs off Main Street to please Wall Street.
Tonight, President Trump's proposed infrastructure plan promises more of the same. It leaves our communities behind and privatizes our roads and highways, turning over the public's infrastructure to private companies. Trump's vision is one of giving Wall Street free rein to make money off our roads and bridges and other systems while leaving Main Street in disrepair. His plan would leave state and local governments scrambling to come up with money to fully fund these projects instead of helping to create the kind of infrastructure that would actually take us into the next century, all the while creating good-paying jobs.
We believe that any investment in our infrastructure must go beyond roads, bridges, and rails, and airports to include our schools, hospitals, and internet, and in rural and urban areas that are struggling. We believe that there is an enormous opportunity to create prosperity for all as we bring our energy infrastructure into the 21st century by committing to renewable and green energy and using products that are made in America.
These are the kinds of investments that will transform our country and grow our economy for all.
Despite a surge in wealth for big corporations and the wealthiest Americans, many working families haven't seen a real raise in decades.
They feel the squeeze of rising rent, healthcare premiums, student loans, and never-ending credit card debt. Many are working multiple jobs that barely pay their bills, but still don't offer the promise of a secure retirement, meaningful savings, and a shot at the American dream. Working families across the country, including some of those who voted for Trump, are still looking for elected officials who will challenge an economy rigged for the special interest and the wealthiest donors.
Unfortunately, Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress aren't interested.
The GOP's recent tax plan is great news if you're part of the 1%. A Republican donor, or a major corporation. But if you're in the middle class, working to make ends meet, the GOP tax plan will not really help you, no matter what they say.
The startling reality is that most of the money saved by corporations from these enormous tax cuts will go to CEOs and shareholders.
How do we know that? The CEOs themselves said so. The GOP made the tax breaks for corporations permanent, while those for the middle class expire. By 2027, 86 million middle-class families will pay more in taxes. And rather than stopping the flow of jobs out of the United States, Trump and the GOP's tax scam actually gives companies a lower rate for offshoring jobs. And although Trump talks a good game on NAFTA, he has yet to renegotiate it so that it actually works for American families, and he continues negotiations in secret without unions or environmental advocates at the table.
The Progressive Caucus believes in an economy that works for all of us, not just the wealthy few. If we want to give working families a break, let's start by raising the minimum wage, protecting workers, expanding paid sick days and paid sick family leave, and stopping the attacks on unions and allowing every young person to graduate from a university or community college debt-free.
Ultimately, the difference between Trump's vision and our vision is that Trump believes that you invest in the richest 1% and you let those benefits trickle down to the 99%. We already know that doesn't work. It's been tried and it fails every time. We believe the exact opposite, that that to stimulate the economy, you invest in the people that power that economy, and income and wealth then accrue to the majority.
President Trump talked a good game on the campaign trail, but he's come up short in following through on his promises. From failing to stop the dumping of Chinese steel on American markets, to enacting legislation that would make it easier, not harder, to stop the offshoring of American jobs, President Trump is breaking his promises to Americans from Kenosha to Detroit.
President Trump failed to put forward a vision that would adequately address our nation's healthcare challenges. His 1 year in office, he and Republicans tried multiple times to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but they failed multiple times. The American people know the truth. The Affordable Care Act is saving lives.
But instead of listening to millions across the country who spoke up to save the ACA, Republicans continue to sabotage it, creating instability and cutting resources for outreach, all to strip more Americans of their health care. That's just wrong.
And despite all this, more people signed up for health care through the marketplaces than ever before. Every American deserves access to affordable health care. No one should have to worry about a pre-existing condition or reaching a lifetime cap for health care. No one should be one healthcare crisis away from bankruptcy.
And although President Trump said he wanted to rein in the skyrocketing prices of prescription drugs, he has done nothing to help. Instead, just this week, he celebrated the swearing in of the new Health and Human Services Secretary, Alex Azar, the former CEO of a huge pharmaceutical company who is responsible for raising the price of insulin by more than 1,000%. Appointing a big pharma CEO to lead the agency that oversees healthcare for Americans is reckless and shows that he has no interest in helping hardworking American families afford life-saving medicine.
Our nation's healthcare challenges also require us to go bolder, which is why we need Medicare for all. Progressives believe that a universal healthcare system is the best way to ensure that all Americans have access to quality, affordable healthcare. We've got more support than ever for Medicare for all, and the Progressive Caucus is going to push to make it a reality.
President Trump continues to allow far-right anti-immigrant conservatives like Stephen Miller to dictate immigration policies that are against our core American values. President Trump himself is solely responsible for making Dreamers deportable last fall when he rescinded the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program put into place by President Obama. Over and over again, he has raised the hopes of these young people across the country. He has talked about a bill of love, and then he has reneged and thrown the dreams and futures not only of those 800,000, but 1.5 million young people who know America is their home.
From the harsh enforcement actions undertaken by the Trump administration to deport people across the country who are serving their communities, to the kicking out of millions of people who are on temporary protected status from El Salvador and Haiti and other countries in turmoil, to the wild claims about building a wall and having Mexico pay for it, this president is turning his back on the heart of what truly makes America great. This president wants you to believe that immigrants are murderers and terrorists, people from countries he termed with vulgarities that we cannot lower ourselves to repeat. He wants to scapegoat immigrants instead of recognizing the tremendous contributions immigrants make every day to our country and our communities.
We reject this. We know that our country is built on the rich history of immigration and the hard work and ideas that millions of future Americans have contributed to our nation. We want a clean Dream Act so that 1.5 million Dreamers can stop being used as political pawns. Once we've done that, we must work together to pass a bipartisan reform of our immigration system so that America can continue its long tradition of opening the doors of opportunity for families in need. Let's remember our ancestors who, unless you're a Native American, came over as willing or unwilling immigrants, brought over on slave ships or escaping war, droughts, and poverty, and seeking a better life. That's who we are, a nation of immigrants, a country made stronger by all of those who have come and made America our home.
Tonight, the president demanded a massive Pentagon spending increase of tens of billions of dollars, which would deprive us of essential resources for domestic needs. Instead, these tax dollars will go to CEOs of bloated Pentagon contractors and not to our service members. It underestimates our military families to not recognize that domestic security is deeply tied to national security. Our military families care about education and health care. They want roads for their families to drive on and a planet to leave to their grandchildren. That's why, as progressives, we'll insist on parity between military and domestic funding. Real security isn't about producing more bombs and bullets, but about defending real people, like Americans whose health care coverage is on the line, those who are being sickened with lead-poisoned water, or our own veterans who are facing homelessness, addiction, and even deportation. We will demand that we spend our dollars wisely, instead of allowing the Pentagon to be the only federal agency that's not audited. We will do everything we can to prepare our military and give them the necessary resources, but then to not send them to war unless absolutely essential.
Tonight in the State of the Union, President Trump once again failed to unite our deeply divided country. Time after time, President Trump has denigrated immigrants, engaged in name-calling with individuals and communities of color, and pushed policies that hurt minority communities. The facts are clear. When President Trump allows nationalists and white supremacists to either work in the White House or controls his agenda, he is further dividing our nation.
The Progressive Caucus believes that President Trump and Speaker Ryan are leading this country in the wrong direction. But the Progressive Caucus is pushing back against an administration that is set on prioritizing corporations over people, breaking up families, and stacking the deck against the American worker.
We'll continue to fight for a level playing field so workers can be paid a fair, livable wage and not have to worry about their jobs being sent overseas. We'll continue to fight against an administration that allows corporations to rewrite rules of a rigged economy that allow them to prioritize profits over people.
And we'll continue to fight for Medicare for all because health care is a right and not a privilege only for those who can afford it.
We'll continue to fight for an open and inclusive country that doesn't discriminate against people because of the color of their skin, the language they speak, or the religion they practice.
The Progressive Caucus will continue to resist and to fight for a more equal and inclusive future for all of us.